Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for everybody who's joined online. Welcome to this session on career strategy, the hidden patterns of success. So, for the next 15, 20 minutes, it's all about you. When was the last time that you took 20 minutes out to focus on your career? A year? 5 years? Ever? Has anyone sat down with you and helped you to plan out your career? How will you make the next jump, the next grade, or into a new role that you've been longing for? Some questions I want to ask today and provide you with some thoughts on. Are there any hidden patterns in those people with successful careers? Are there key accelerators, behaviors, or things that can hold people back? And is there a simple framework that you could learn that could help you to accelerate? What connects all these famous people? I mean, regardless of what you think of these people, whether you agree with their approach, their ideology, what they've said, or maybe even tweeted, they all worked out what I call the hidden patterns of success. They understood the expectations that people had of them. They quickly managed to build trust. They took ownership of their situation or opportunity, and eventually they developed an identity, something that they were all known for, their efforts and their achievements. So what I've discovered isn't necessarily anything new. I mean, many people through the ages have used it already to their advantage. But I researched it, and I put it together into this easily digestible format, and here I am presenting it to you. I've had this since 2008. I really hope you find it useful. At a high level, let me orient you around this framework, and then what I want to do is tackle each phase and behavior in detail. I've observed and found that there are 4 career phases that we all go through. We start by needing to understand what's expected of us. We need fair expectations. We then want to be trusted to deliver. Next, we take ownership, and eventually we build our identity for that bit of the business, the team, the service, or the product. But, speaking from experience, getting from the place whereby you've understood the expectations to being able to do them in a faultless way so that you can demonstrate trust is not an overnight thing. So how do you quickly move from one phase to the next? Well, in addition to the 4 phases, I found there to be 5 key accelerator behaviors that all great leaders and individuals with successful careers that I observe do. They have a mentor. They're constantly developing new skills. They know how to teach other people. They create new ideas, and they can connect and verify those ideas with other people. So now that you have the overview, the 4 phases and the 5 accelerators, let's start looking at each one of those in turn. First, the phases. So the first phase we all enter is getting clear on our expectations. We need to understand what's required of us. Sound basic? Well, how clear are you on your role, your objectives, your goal, your endpoint? If you don't understand the expectations that the company or the team has of you, how can you achieve them? If today I asked you to rate your understanding of what's expected of you on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your level of clarity today? If you scored less than 10 out of 10, what else do you need to know? For each circle on this model, you'll also get from me a context word to think about. And for this phase, expectations, it's about fairness. How fair are those expectations? Even if you understand the expectations the organization has of you, are they fair? How about the expectations that you have of the company? Have you communicated those expectations to your leader? How can they deliver on those expectations unless they know them? The second phase we all go through is being able to repeatedly perform the task or deliver the work or close the sales that are expected of us. When we're doing this phase well, we'll know it because people have undoubted faith in us to deliver regularly, to get it right first time, in whatever context that may be. They stop the micromanaging. They stop checking in to see if you're making good progress. They just let you get on with it. It may be answering the phone, it may be closing sales, it may be giving advice. Whatever it is that you do, your goal in this phase is to reach the point whereby your leaders have complete faith that they can trust you to repeatedly deliver on the expectations set for you. The context word is faith. The third phase is all about ownership. Once you've passed through the phase where you've demonstrated trust, you may then be offered ownership for key initiatives, projects, or deliverables. The irony I find about this phase is that as soon as you get given it, you actually want to find ways of sharing it with others. Sharing is the context word. Think back to our great leaders that we started with. Jacqueline Gold, the CEO of the lingerie company, Ann Summers, she didn't build her empire on her own. She didn't sew the underwear sets. She didn't design the brands. She gave that responsibility away. Presidents, prime ministers, they appoint others to serve under them or alongside them. Even the great historical, religious, and spiritual leaders, they never made it alone. Mother Teresa had her nuns, Jesus, his 10 disciples. Once you get given ownership, find ways to share it with others. Otherwise, you will become the bottleneck, and ownership will feel very different. I mean, even a burden. I was speaking to a colleague recently, and they kept saying to me, I've got all these things that I have to do for people. They keep asking me, and it's stacking up. I asked him, have you tried teaching them how you do what you do? The key is that the project that you own or your process, your company or your idea cannot scale if you don't share it with others. The final phase that we all go through is the journey to identity. Now, this isn't about status or power or pride. In this phase, we become something of a figurehead. We become known for something, leading some group, having original thought or processes which we've scaled. Now, you may jump to the conclusion that this happens towards the end of your career when we're wise and old, but think about it. Why is it then that some people who are 15 or 25 or 40 years old get to stand on the metaphorical stage? It isn't only when you get to the end of your career. It's just a phase. Equally, it doesn't have to be a stage that you stand on. It is any way in which you have become known for something. Once you've become known for something, think about the context word I've assigned for identity, which is leverage. What I mean is, how can you leverage your identity? It isn't about status or power or pride. Use your profile for good, to pull someone else up, a new idea, your team up, or even to pull your company up. A simple example may be having become known for a process or having built a company to deflect some of that to others. Successful leaders and individuals, I find, look out of the window more than they look in the mirror. And because of this, they ascend more frequently to positions of influence. I say pay it forward. The reality is, though, that although you want to progress from expectations to trust, to ownership, to identity, it's really hard to do. I found that typically you can only move in straight lines. That's where the accelerator behaviors come in. These are the ones that help you to move through the phases and to make the transition smoother and also more concrete. You don't want to be going backwards from, say, trust to expectations or start building ownership on incorrect expectations. The first accelerator is find a mentor. A mentor can be anyone that can help you to develop trust or identity. Now, whilst this is quite a shallow way of developing trust, because it depends on someone else's credibility to build up yours, it works. The point of a mentor is that they can help you focus on what to do next. They can help you focus on what skills to develop. They can help you focus on your personal brand. They can help you focus on the things that you may be blind to. Focus is the context word for this accelerator behavior. Mentoring in the context of developing new skills or helping you to see blind spots is perhaps the most obvious and typically the main use for it. But it's interesting to consider that you could also move from expectations straight to identity from here. Think about it. You walk through the door of your new company on day one and someone says, hey you, why don't you come and talk to the group of people next week? Here's a script to follow. I wrote it for you. They put you on a stage. Does that feel good? Comfortable? Secure? No. The reason is you have very shallow foundations, and going down into what I call the deeper layers will help cement that credibility. Jumping down a layer, invest in your skills. This is undoubtedly a safe or a safer way to develop trust. You may be in a position where you clearly understand the expectations the company has of you, but you may be in a new role or being asked to do something new, develop a new process, or take on extra responsibility. You may need to consider that you have to develop new skills before you can demonstrate trust in that new role. But remember, you're investing in your skills. Invest is the context word. Although it will take time to learn these new skills, you can take that investment with you. The third accelerator behavior is creating new ideas. Here we're entering what I call the deepest layer, and more about these layers later. But in essence, creating ideas is about breaking free from always delivering someone else's vision or goal and starting on the journey of creating your own vision of how the team, the process, the company, or the project should develop and grow. It's about creating new value. Value is the context word. Now, this isn't for everyone. Some people are perfectly happy to be followers, and there's no shame in that. Having said that, I don't want people to think that creating is only the domain of strategists or business leaders or people with innovation in their job titles or CEOs. Having an idea that is aligned with the expectations of the company or the team and for which you have the skills is as simple as it gets. How could you innovate on a process or suggest a new target market or a different application or a flavor or a range of new products? The fourth accelerator behavior is learning to connect with others. The connect behavior is relatively simple, but it's not always easy for everybody. A key skill of someone who rises to influence an identity at any level is their ability to take ideas and to communicate them with others and gain their validation or their agreement. Validation is the context word. Have a think about the different networks in which you operate and from which you could get feedback and validation. Maybe it's friends or social media, maybe focus groups or colleagues or sports teams or committees or faith groups or your family. Through connecting these ideas with other people, you will learn and get validation, hopefully even constructive critique that will help you shape your new idea. It may be that you do go back to the drawing board or to the create stage a few times in this journey as you gain feedback from others. That's the point. Learn how to socialize your ideas because eventually you'll see that you get validation from all or most of the people that you've been able to connect with, and that is when you know that you're moving towards ownership. The fifth accelerator behavior is about teaching others. Now, when I talked about taking ownership, I said share it with others as quickly as you receive it. That qualifies you as a leader. You have other people following you, maybe for a long time, maybe for a short time. But the shift from the ownership phase to the identity phase is dependent on your ability to teach others what you know. That may be your vision, your new idea, or whatever you've taken or been given ownership for. You cannot expect a team to follow your new vision or process unless you can teach them it and they can repeat it. This is how your ideas will scale, and scale is the context word. Is there any idea that ever scaled by itself? Very few, I imagine. Jeff Bezos of Amazon fame and also the founder of the Blue Origin aerospace program didn't build his billions on his own, nor does any prime minister or president deliver their reform program for their country on their own. They need to teach others so that their ideas can scale. This journey from ownership to identity is critical. Imagine if Barack Obama had held all the ownership for his Hope movement on his own. Nothing would ever have been done, or at least very little relative to what he, or in fact any other president, achieved through teaching others their vision. Even Twitter had to teach people how to tweet. It's impossible for any individual or leader to rise to identity unless they can teach. A few final dimensions to this model. First, you'll have heard me talk about these shallow depth or the deep layer And that's because each stage or behavior exists in a layer. Things that exist in the top layer are generally more fragile than things that exist or happen in the deep layer. If you find yourself existing or operating just in the top layer, do you feel more or less safe? If you never venture into the deepest layer, will you ever create your own ideas, or will you always be delivering on someone else's plans and their dreams and their visions? Start to have a think about which box you find yourself in now. Here's another angle to consider. Let's be frank for a minute. It's a nice model, but what's in it for me? Why should I subscribe? Well, let me show you how you can maximize the return on your career and maybe even start getting paid more. As you move from left to right through the model, you should be seeing a higher return on investment and probably gaining greater financial reward. Think about it. If you only exist in a left-hand column, you're learning what's expected of you, investing in your skills, and maybe creating some new ideas, but you aren't delivering anything. You aren't yet adding real value. When you operate in the middle column, we can expect a little more. You have someone mentoring you or sponsoring you, someone looking out for you and helping you to focus. You can demonstrate repeatedly delivering quality work, and people trust you. You're building your internal and external network and validating new ideas by connecting with others. When you operate in the right-hand column, you are in the high return on investment space. You should be lifting a burden from someone else by taking ownership. You're creating scalable value for your company or project by creating processes that are teachable so others can follow them. And through leveraging your identity, you're able to allow some of that fame to rub off on others and pull them up with you. Now, by going deep and moving towards the right-hand side, you can really maximize the return on your career investment. A final thing to consider is how you feel as you're moving through these phases. That may sound strange, but it's about self-awareness. Through the middle of the diagram, you have what I call the loyalty line. In the top triangle, you're more likely to be loyal to the company, and the further you are from that line, you'll be more loyal. In the bottom triangle, you'll be loyal to yourself. Further away, higher loyalty to yourself. In ownership, you probably feel like you're on top of the world if you're doing it right. You might even find yourself questioning why the company doesn't pay you more or be thinking about leaving. I mean, really. In the top left box, in expectations, you'll be feeling grateful for your job or your new challenge, but because you're still learning, you'll feel like you're more fragile and therefore dependent on the company. If you can improve your self-awareness, you can recognize why you're feeling a certain way in each phase, which will counter either your under or your overconfidence. Let me explain. Imagine for a moment if you're in the ownership phase, but you got overconfident. What might result? Your skills as a team leader get questioned. Your overconfidence turns to arrogance. Worse still, if you're in the identity phase, your people start questioning your behavior. People that once agreed with you may not want to associate with you in case those negative vibes rub off. You lose your followers who you taught. You go back to basics to the trust phase, having to regain people's trust. Or perhaps your leader has a word with you and has to reset your expectations about what's expected in terms of behavior. You're back to square one. What a shame. If only you'd had greater self-awareness. Don't underestimate how you feel has an impact on what you do when you go through each phase. One more thing. I've alluded to this throughout, but I want to say it explicitly. Have you noticed that there's no notion of time in this model at all? How quickly then should you be able to progress from one phase to the next? Well, it's up to you. I can use this model in a conversation, in a project, in a month, in a year, for my whole career. It's timeless. So what I've discovered isn't anything new. Many people through the ages have used it to their advantage, but here it is. I put it into a digestible format. I really hope you found it useful. Now that you have this new framework or this language, can you discuss it with someone else to help you work out where you are? Leaders, Could this help you get cut through in mentoring or career conversations with your teams? A colleague comes to you and says, hey, why does she always get given ownership for key roles and I don't? Well, you say, think back to the model. What Sarah does really well is give me confidence that she can handle those tasks consistently well and on a regular basis, so I gave her ownership for it. Or this, hey, how come he always gets to do, or we always have to do what he says? Do you have some different ideas, James? Yes, I do. Oh, great. Well, why don't you test them with others, and if they agree, I'll come and I'll back you 100% and give you ownership for that new process or that idea. Or maybe it's this. Lucy, I saw the targets that you've given us for the year, and one of them is a 150% increase on last year. It doesn't seem right. Could you explain these expectations to us and how they represent a fair increase year on year? So what now? Can you work out where you are now? Where are you going? What do you need to do next? What conversations do you need to have? Will you make an intentional plan? So that's the end of the session. What happens now? Do we answer some of these questions? Let's have a look. What have we got in here? Lots of people saying they're going on Twitter, which is great. Actually, lots of people. Where does age play a part? So interesting. I mean, when I actually, so question was from Fiona. How does age play a part? Well, I find that the way in which careers are being had today is very different to some of the generations that went before us, where you may have joined a company, had a 35, 40-year career, you got a good pension and you left. And the reason why I developed this was to make the social contract between an individual and a company much more explicit, because it felt like the generation that I'm a part of expected to move faster through all of these phases. You know, they start maybe in expectations, but I immediately want identity, I immediately want ownership, and gosh, if you don't trust me, then, well, I'll just go and work somewhere else. And it was that kind of that led me to develop this, because I feel like if we can have a really honest, rational conversation like this, where the framework is completely non-judgmental, it's just factual, it helps to kind of set that social contract between an individual and maybe their leader or a company. Leanne, should your mentor be in your current line of work? No, I think it could be anybody, but I think often having that external perspective from outside of your team can be really helpful. Sometimes if you've got a leader who does mentoring really well and you can get feedback from them and they're really good at kind of giving you objective feedback, then they could be a good mentor to you. But I think it's worth having somebody outside who really is all about, you know, focusing on you and giving you honest feedback. So I like to have not just one mentor, but quite a few. And when people come to me and say, hey, can you mentor me? I always say, yeah, great, what about? And then they usually stop. And I think when you enter a mentoring relationship, always be intentional about what that is about. And then once you've finished learning what you need to learn about that, then end that relationship unless there's something else that, you know, otherwise it just becomes a coffee once a week for a moan. And, you know, that's nice sometimes, but, you know, the mentor probably has other mentees as well. And you've learned what you need to learn. So kind of move on and release them from that, and then go and find somebody else to learn from. When you're relatively new in an organization, other than delivering consistently, what else can you do to move deeper into the layers? So I think you may be, thanks, Nazis, for that. When you're early on in an organization, I think it's really helpful to bring and make people aware of the skills that you have, because they hired you for one thing, but actually often people have hidden depths or hidden skills. Something that I've done with my team as well has been like, tell me everything that I didn't know about you from your CV. So, you know, that you've suddenly found out that somebody speaks Japanese and understands the culture there. Okay, great. Well, they're the person that I'm going to assign to working with that team. So, you know, it's about taking the experience that you have and the skills that you have, and then having that external perspective to come in and to start to help create the new vision for where that company or that project could go. The reason why we bring in fresh skills from external is because we want that external perspective. So typically when you're new in an organization, you can add a lot of value because you haven't become ingrained in what's not possible. You haven't become biased, as it were, to seeing some of the roadblocks that are there, I think. Would you say each and every step is mandatory in achieving the whole process? So can you expect to achieve ownership without ever having a mentor? Yeah, you can, absolutely. So, you know, you could go from expectations through to trust, through skills, and then, you know, you could even go through to teaching and to identity. But as you go down into that deep layers, you really kind of cement your base. But having said that, I think, you know, even if your skills let you down, hey, you've still got a mentor who's there to vouch for you, or some kind of mentor, you could say sponsor, who's there to vouch for you. So building a strong profile is all about completing as many of these as you can. And I think sometimes you know, I found myself as well, you reach a phase and you go, oh no, I haven't done that bit, and then you have to go back and kind of check that box. So yeah, I complied to post for my career, great. I work with a tenure team of 17-year average. How do I motivate them to become more engaged? They just want things to be the same and really don't want to work harder when they have the bandwidth to do so. Thank you, Suzanne. Very interesting question. I think, I suppose the question is why do they come to work? Is it about helping them to understand that they aren't just stuck in the one phase that they're in? You know, is it that you know, you want to try and move them from the left-hand side of the model to the right-hand side of the model? Presumably, if they're more productive, they could be doing other new things. And I think also that, you know, when you reach that point in identity, often that's the jumping off point to then going back into the model at expectations. So that's why I like to think about this without a time scale on it, because identity isn't like that's when I go in the box and pass on to the next life. That's when I've completed that phase of my career and I've become known for that thing. But then actually, you know, I watched Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of the UK, being interviewed once, and he said, you know, the funniest thing is that you leave office when you're most qualified for the role that you were doing, and it's a terrible shame. And that's kind of true, because it sounds like if they've got such a significant tenure, then maybe pushing them a bit further down into the deeper layers to create and to connect and come up with new ideas and giving them a bit more ownership, maybe that's a tactic that you could try. Now, I know that we're at the half-hour point, so I don't know if we have to stop there, Jeff or Fiona.
Yep, no, okay. That's fine, Chris. Thank you very much. Folks, before you drop off for today's sessions, we're going to put a link into the chat, which is just a very brief survey. It will take you less than 1 minute to fill out. If you wouldn't mind filling that out before you drop off today, we would thank you very much. Also, just a reminder of the other virtual sessions of the Mercer Shares Festival are still going on. I'll put a link to that in the chat as well, so still plenty of room to sign up for other sessions in case you haven't done so. But we had a great amount of questions in the chat, Chris. Thank you very much for following up on them. And the recording will be posted on the Mercer Shares registration page for the virtual festival sessions later on today. So please go back to that page to find that. But thank you very much, Chris, for today's sessions. We really appreciate you coming, and thanks everybody else for joining today. We'll see you all soon.